a really big thank you, Steve, for joining us today as part of almost one of the final, actually, of the Senior EdTech Leaders sessions that we're doing at the moment. We've been talking to a lot of EdTech leaders across the EdTech industry, especially around MIS, because obviously that's a big chunk of my background. But it's really good to grab hold of you and be able to get some of your time and to talk a little bit around WCBS. I know you've been in the market for a while. I remember you when I was in Capita, so I've been definitely aware and keeping track of WCBS for sure. However, it'd be really interesting because you play in the independent market, and obviously a lot of the people who may be watching this are from the maintain market. It'd be really interesting to get a little bit of an idea of who you are, what you've been up to, that sort of thing, if you don't mind.
Sure, no, great, and pleasure to do it. Thanks for having me. So I mean, as you say, we've been around quite a long time. So WCBS, we've been around for just over 35 years. We do specialize, as you say, in the independent and international school market, and typically across three core areas. So finance, which is actually where our heritage is. We started off building finance solutions for independent schools, and then also moving into MIS and admissions. We currently service just over 600 schools across 40 different countries worldwide, with offices in Beijing and China. We'll talk a little bit more about that later, but we're fully geared up for in-country operations over in China. But then also our head offices are in the UK. And in the UK, on the UK independent school side, we service circa 35% of the UK independent school market across one of our products, but the majority of those take finance, with others maybe taking MIS and admissions as well. So that's us. Over all that time, our products have evolved, right? 35 years, you can't still be with the same system that you were 35 years ago. So there's been quite a lot of evolution over that period of time. However, none more so than probably over the last 2 to 3 years. So over the last 2 to 3 years, we've invested many millions of pounds into our product set, ultimately to deliver what we consider as a 10x better user experience for the customers. We've seen so much disruption across other sectors, whether that's fintech and consumer finance, for instance, with the likes of Free Trade and Monzo and Revolut and Starling delivering fantastic products and services to consumers. But I'm not sure we've really seen that level of disruption come through to the MIS market as yet. Not to say there aren't companies doing fabulous jobs, because there are, but often this has been an evolution over time to deliver additional products, additional services, but all on the back of that platform. Our owner, Giles Clark, has backed us, and on that regard, we've invested, as I said, many millions of pounds to develop what we consider to be next generation technology, using the very latest tech to deliver, hopefully, that best in class user experience that really does provide a 10x better experience for the customer, to free up their time to allow them ultimately to deliver outstanding education. That's the game, and that resulted in the launch of Hub MIS in October of last year.
Wow. Yeah, absolutely. So I'm totally agree. I totally agree with you. I know we've briefly spoke about this, but ultimately, technology should be there to break down all the barriers and the pain points, really, enable, like you say, the schools to actually do what fundamentally they're there for, which is to teach, and freeing up their time to do that, or helping with some support and direction. I think is really, that's exactly where I think companies need to go. And I agree absolutely. Again, I think sometimes EdTech, in the EdTech market, we're a bit slow at sort of getting to that point. I think sometimes we don't look at the latest tech and sort of go, how, would this give our customers a better experience? Do these services give our customers a better experience? So I fundamentally agree with what you're saying, and I'm guessing Hub MIS encapsulates some of that.
Yeah, we certainly hope so. And I think just going back to that point, this is very difficult often for an incumbent to reinvest and rebuild from the ground up. It's a lot easier just to build on that platform, add new functionality and new features, give it a new lick of paint, and move from there. But if you really want to deliver that best-in-class experience, sometimes, reap the benefits of the next generation technology, you actually just have to rebuild it from the ground up. But there's such big solutions at MIS that it's a pretty large undertaking. However, I do think in many instances, you might need 100% of the functionality to meet a tender, for instance, or to tick every box. I think the reality is most schools probably only ever use maybe 45, 50%, and that varies. Different schools will use different functionality from where it is. But I think being able to take that, cut it back, and just focus on what's important and put things where they should go, not where they have to go, taking all the learnings that you've had over, in our case, 35 years, it's pretty interesting journeys over that time. And then also with some focus groups from schools to really understand what's important to them to deliver that, should enable the best experience ultimately.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. So you're right. I think there's an element when people go out to tender, they actually sort of go, this is what an MIS should do, rather than say, what actually is my need? What's actually do I need as far as the school is concerned? And obviously there are some external environmental influences to that. So in the maintained sector, it'd be like census, it has to be able to do census. It may not gain much as a school apart from funding, but you might not gain much as far from a day-to-day perspective, but actually you need to do it, in which case any MIS needs to enable that. But you're right. I think sometimes there's an element of schools sort of going, well, this is what every MIS I think does, or this is what is on some of these frameworks. In which case, then we should only look for MISs that fulfill all of this functionality, even if we don't use it. In which case, and you could argue, maybe MISs are over engineered, or they're not simplistic or simple enough in the sense of giving that sort of experience to the customer.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think the other danger that you get from going down that route is it can become a bit of a commodity. So it's just, what feature do you have? What's the best price that we can deliver? And then it becomes a bit of a race to the bottom. And I'm not sure that services anybody very well, whether that's the customer or the supplier. Surely it has to be around delivering additional value. And I think there's a lot of things that you can do with an MIS, because it's so core to a school to do that, outside of traditional functionality, whether it's taking attendance or writing a school report or sending some communication out, all the core functionality that you would expect. But with the, as we consider it, cloud native next gen solutions, the opportunity to really take that data, own it, and maybe take some anonymized, aggregated information and pass that across to learnings through the product into schools in other areas, maybe even other countries. I think that's where you can really start to do some interesting things that I certainly am not seeing a huge amount of that in the space at the moment. And I'm not saying we're there or ready to do that yet, but we are building the platform very much with that sort of thing in mind that will enable us to do that and add that value to the schools.
So you've got a little bit of luxury in the sense of, I've obviously spoken to a lot of MIS companies already, so I've got a number of different questions in my mind, which they may not have had as such. But it's in some of the, so based on talking to a number of those sort of MIS companies, some of them are very much into that sort of mindset of consolidate, just basically produce a single solution across, cuts across all management, the whole of the management that's required within school, HR, finance, MIS, the lot. Are you in that sort of stable, or are you in more of the best of breed, where actually you'll partner with people, collaborate, to basically deliver what the school absolutely needs, but also it's best of breed. So, it might be a little bit more expensive actually because of that way or that approach. Which whereabouts are you in that sort of?
Yeah, I think that's a really, really good question. And with the consolidation that you see in the market, I think there's a real risk that it'll be, come to us, we're a one-stop shop. We'll give you all the features that you want at a great price because you're buying it all from one supplier. Now, as we just said a minute ago, I'm not sure that delivers the best outcome. I'm not sure it delivers best choice for schools. So for us, it's very much, we want to provide the best of breed solutions across three main areas: MIS, admissions, and finance. However, should you decide to take, our MIS but not our finance, or our admissions but not our MIS, it's our intention that with the whole products being built on API, so not just adding an API retrospectively, but very much built with that in mind, so we can open the whole product up without causing any vulnerabilities, both from a read and a write perspective. We will enable the schools to be able to choose best of breed solutions across the board where they see fit. So it might be something like a SOX, for instance, for certain things. It might be a VLE such as a Firefly that they want to have. That's not our intention to move into those areas in the slightest. It's around having a single source of data entry and a very slick experience so that you can integrate and actually integrate deeper than maybe what's being done at the moment. Because of that technology being built on API, we're able to expose more endpoints to the third parties to deliver a more integrated experience across the whole Edtech suite, frankly. So no, for us, it's very much about best of breed. Clearly, we'd like schools to take our 3 core systems, ideally. However, we'd also recognize they're on a journey. So they won't necessarily migrate everything in one go, or they might just say, actually, I really love this product over here and I just don't want to change it. No problem at all. We'll integrate accordingly. So yeah, for me, it's all around best of breed and giving schools choice.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I go from one side to the other, if I'm being honest. I don't think there's actually a right or correct answer. I guess it's down to the school or the group of schools ultimately in the long term. But I always find it interesting, from a business perspective, where would you stand? And it sounds like you say, you're more best of breed. I think from a business perspective, I think I'd probably sit in the same space, because I think, ultimately you're stretching yourself quite heavily if you keep on trying to build more and more and more. And I think, there are definitely systems out there that have done so. And I was part of one at one point. So, I think you've got to be really careful. You have to be really careful that if you've got the number of resources, then it's all right, but that's obviously increasing exponentially. But, you need to increase them exponentially. But ultimately, always you stretch yourself too far, where you become a sort of like a jack of all trades and sort of master of none if you're not careful.
Yeah, that's right. You end up diluting your offering in certain areas, and I think that can hamper your reputation at times. So for us, I'm not saying that we wouldn't necessarily look to expand outside of admissions, MIS and finance, but there's no plans in the short term to do, or medium term for that matter. There's so much that we can do in those core areas, and hopefully do those to the very best of our abilities, and leave the other fabulous EdTech companies out there that are doing some great things to do what they do, and partner from a very sensible position rather than treading on each other's toes.
And actually, I suppose it's more important because you're multi-country. So actually, one thing definitely I knew. So when we tried to go into India within the Sims business, there was so many additional requirements, from transport. Transport was quite important to in India, but also they in some schools they wanted a laundry system as well. So there was quite a lot of difference in the sense of that, it wasn't a UK based MIS. It had to be adapted, and the MIS bit is okay because you can add more more fields or whatever, but actually all the other requirements you definitely had to partner.
Yeah, I think that's right. And internationally, it's probably more relevant than it is just in the UK market. So, I'm thinking of China in particular, and, WeChat is huge, for instance. If you're going to do communications over there, you need to integrate with WeChat. It's as simple as that, because that's the method that everybody uses to communicate. And I think there's lots of other instances like that, whether it's a VLE that somebody uses in a different country, or whether it's a different communication package. It could be a range of different solutions, but being built on API, being open to opening up that API to anybody, ultimately they can then choose who they want best of breed. We can have our selected partners that we work with, and also the likes of Wand and Group Core to really open that up. But should they want to do their own development, and we do see some of that in the independent school space as well, some really nice niche things that happens at individual schools, they can do that.
Yeah, that's very true. Actually, even in this country, I remember working with like Clifton College, and they had their own development team, and they'd build their own bespoke pieces of software for sure. So yeah, absolutely. It's not just actually international, but yeah, it's quite interesting. And you sort of mentioned China and Beijing, so that seems like a big. And this might answer my next question actually in some ways. But so that I'm assuming you're seeing that as strategically as a big market for yourselves.
Yeah, that's right. So we invested quite heavily a couple of years ago into China. So I mean, the journey for Hub, as I'm sure you know pretty well, and Hub MIS has been challenged. We had a false start or two, and then around 2 years ago we decided, let's rebuild from the ground up, and just get it absolutely right. So it was a relatively, challenged or painful, whichever way you want to put it, journey to get there. But we're incredibly happy with the result. But during that time, we decided that China strategically was quite important, in terms of the number of schools that they have over there. And we already service scores of schools in China already. but we wanted to do it properly. And if we're going to be a cloud native system, you need to be hosted in country. Therefore, you need to have a Chinese enterprise. Therefore, you need a Chinese investor. So we've been through all of that. We're fully set up over there. We're hosting with Alibaba in the Ali Cloud, and Hub MIS will actually be launching over there in March of this year. So we're just building all the infrastructure at that at the moment, testing it, and then we'll be putting a number of early adopter schools onto the Alibaba environment with Hub MIS, just after Q1. So very early April.
Okay. So I'm not sure if this is a fair question to ask, but I'm going to ask anyway. But so regarding actually going back to the sort of like requirements of the from the UK, China, and other countries they're in, do you find the requirements are more simpler in the sense of that they're easier, they're not quite as, because the UK MISs are quite deep, the function are extremely functionally rich. Do you find that similar in places like China and other countries, or?
So similar, yes, because we typically we're only going after international schools, so we're not looking at any maintained schools in these countries. So they all have very similar requirements, and I think it's probably a little bit too simplistic to say that they do offer don't require all the functionality maybe that you might see in a UK independent school. But I think on the whole, that's probably a fair reflection. Some of the UK independent schools, they've been obviously around a very long time. They do a lot of different things. They're very well established. The very nature of the international market is it's young and it's growing rapidly. So more often than not, you see they might start with something more basic, certainly if the school is opening up, and really add those features and functionality over time. But then if I think about China in particular, so nothing changes from what I've just said there, but in terms of the infrastructure, we've had to do some specific work, because for instance, in the UK, we all host with Google Cloud, all hosted on Google Cloud with 99.95% guaranteed uptime, point in time recovery. We're releasing twice a week, and we want to maintain that level of infrastructure for our global solution. And the Google Cloud infrastructure services us globally, typically, with the exception of China or any other countries that might have local restrictions, which is a couple others I can think of. But in China, we've chosen Ali Cloud, but clearly Google is not something that you can use over there. So we've had to find alternatives for some of the services and plugins to make that work. But actually, that's been relatively straightforward. I think the tech team may have a different view, but it doesn't seem to have been too challenging.